Sara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sara MacKenzie, Director of Operations and Admissions at NC State University. Great to be here and see everybody again. Thank you again for your patience and flexibility and joining us today.
So I wanted to just really briefly review the agenda for today. So hopefully you all are seeing the agenda screen now. We are going to be having a wonderful session from Dr. Christie Rains coming up at 9:30. And then after that, immediately following, we'll have a roundtable with some representatives from 4 colleges and universities here in North Carolina. We've got a set of questions that we're going to ask them, but we would love to have some questions from attendees. So please use the Q&A feature to put questions in both for Dr. Rains' session and also after that for the college admissions roundtable. If you could use the Q&A for that, that will help us make sure that those questions are asked as part of the webinar today. And then after both of those things, we'll have a little bit of information about some things that are coming up with SACAC. But what I'd like to do now is introduce Deb Ryan, and she is going to briefly discuss SACAC's Government Relations Committee and some of the things that are coming up in North Carolina for that. So Deb, if you would unmute yourself and say hello to everybody, and I'll go to your slide.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us this time. I'll be really quick. We have a really great Lunch and Learn series coming up March 20th through 22nd. We're going to be hearing from Ricky Hurtado, who's actually spoken for us for government relations before, and Alice Doble from Latinx Ed. And then we're also going to be hearing from 2 wonderful young folks who are doing a lot of work on scholarship displacement. Zanaya Lewis and Michael Woods from the Yes She Can campaign. And then Jane Ann and I, she is my co-chair for government relations, are going to be doing an Advocacy 101 session on that Monday. So it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 1 o'clock. Feel free to bring your lunch and snacks. I'll put the registration into the link and into the chat, the registration link into the chat. And we're really excited for people to join us. The one other thing I would say as well is that I am actually going to be leaving as the co-chair. My term is done this June. So if anyone is interested in taking on some really great advocacy work and learning more about how to implement change in our wonderful state, please let either Jane or myself know, and we will get you hooked up with the right people. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Deb. We appreciate you sharing that information, and I know that those are some fantastic events that we'll be able to learn a lot about what's happening in North Carolina and the way we can continue to be great advocates for our students. I'd like to take a minute here to just introduce our next speaker. We are very fortunate today to have Dr. Christie Rains with us, and she's going to be talking to us about creating a culture of wellness in schools. Dr. Rains has a PhD in professional counseling, her master's in school counseling, and also a master's in criminal justice, and a bachelor's in international studies. She's worked in education in various roles for over 15 years and is currently my colleague, and I'm so grateful to work with her every day. She's our Director of Student Support Services here at Fayetteville Academy, where she manages everything on the pre-K through 12 level, including the accommodations process and social emotional learning for our students. In the past, she's also worked with the Department of Defense dependent schools in Germany and U.S. Army Child, Youth, and School Services, both overseas and here stateside. So we are really, really grateful to have Christie with us today to share some information about creating a culture of wellness in schools. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that she can start sharing hers. Remember, please put your questions that you have for Dr. Rains as we go through the presentation into the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get to those. So thank you, Dr. Rains, for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, Joanna or Miss Frady, for sharing a little bit of information. So now I don't have to introduce myself. Thank you. Let's see. I've got a couple screens, so let me find the right one. I believe it is this one. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. We're going to jump right in. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us while we got everything squared away. And I'm excited to share some things with you about cultivating a culture of wellness within our schools. As Ms. Frady said, I work with pre-K through 12 here at Fayetteville Academy, and we're doing a lot of different things here, and I've worked in a lot of different areas, and it's something that I'm very excited about. So I'm excited to share some things with you today. Today we're going to explore wellness as a general topic, and then we're going to discuss how we can support wellness, how we can support our students, and how we can support the wellness of our staff. I want to point out that I intentionally chose not to address parents and families in this discussion. I did that on purpose, intentionally. Although they are a vital part of student wellness, I wanted to focus on how schools could impact student wellness. I wanted to focus on how we can share information with families in an attempt to educate and share resources, and include them in that conversation, and how they might reinforce that. But for the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to focus on how schools can impact student wellness while they are in our care, and then kind of focus on staff wellness. For what we're dealing with right now, I think that's really important. So I chose not to focus on the parent piece today. We're going to start with defining wellness. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development defines wellness as a dynamic state characterized by students experiencing the ability and opportunity to fulfill personal and social goals. Wellness encompasses multiple dimensions: cognitive, psychological, physical, social, and material. It can be measured both objectively and subjectively. And for the purposes of my presentation, I'll be using wellness and well-being interchangeably. In a study of people in more than 150 countries, Gallup has identified 5 main aspects of well-being that shape our lives: purpose, social, financial, community, and physical. Purpose or career well-being is liking what you do each day and being motivated to achieve your goal. In education, purpose well-being is related to faculty and staff engagement and their ability to create excitement in students for learning and development. Social well-being includes supportive relationships with classmates, faculty, and staff. Financial well-being in an individual's ability to manage economic life, reduce stress, and increase security. This can include the ability to put food on the table, buy school supplies, keep their employment. And this affects a parent's, students, or staff members' financial well-being. Community well-being involves liking where you live, feeling safe, having pride in your community, your campus, your school, and feeling safe, a sense of belonging. Physical well-being includes having good health and enough energy to get things done on a day-to-day basis. For our staff and students, having physical well-being, it requires nutritious meals, exercise, sufficient sleep, and healthy ways to deal with stress. Now that we've identified the 5 interconnected elements of wellness, those being purpose, social, financial, community, and physical, how can we build wellness into our day-to-day lives? Researchers have identified 5 ways individuals can actively work to improve and maintain a sense of wellness. That includes connection, being aware, helping others, continuous learning, and being active. Connecting with others includes spending time catching up with others. This can also include getting out into nature, taking a nature walk, spending time with pets, calling or texting friends, sharing a meal with our family or our friends, building connections with colleagues, neighbors, friends, family. Awareness, being aware and curious, being present, taking notice of the world around you, reflecting and appreciating what matters to you. Helping others can be as simple as smiling at someone that passes by, doing something for a friend or a stranger, volunteering, joining a community group, and creating those meaningful connections. Continuously learning, trying something new, rediscovering an old interest, setting goals and challenges for yourself. Being active, getting outside, playing games, walking, running, swimming, gardening, dancing, moving your body in a way that feels good to you. And this is going to look different for everyone. So how do we assess well-being within our schools? And what questions should we ask in regards to wellness? Where are we thriving within these elements that we just mentioned? And what do we need to do better? What are our institutional strengths? Are our students connecting with each other? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they getting enough exercise? Do they feel safe in their schools? What gets in our way of helping our students? Do our staff have healthy ways of dealing with stress? Do we need to train in more areas? Do they feel pride in their schools? Do they have a sense of financial well-being? Considering these questions can help us learn more about how to improve the well-being and engagement of our educators and our students, as well as create a culture of wellness within our institutions. The push on the focus on mental health and wellness in schools is not new. We've been hearing about the mental health crisis for some time now, and COVID has simply exacerbated this need. According to the World Health Organization, an estimated 10.5 million children worldwide have lost a parent or a caregiver to COVID-19, and 7.5 million of those children were orphaned. And I want you to just sit with that number for a second, because that is an enormous number. 10.5 million lost a parent or a caregiver, and 7.5 million were orphaned. 17 million US children struggle with hunger, and this is 6 million more than before the pandemic. Recent years have reinforced how much our nation still struggles with racism and anti-LGBTQ hatred. And most recently, we've seen rises in prices everywhere as inflation impacts our families. And all of these things are impacting our students and our staff. According to the National Education Association, 1/3 of our parents said their child has recently shown symptoms of mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. 75% of US parents said their child would benefit from mental health counseling, and this is a 7% increase since 2021. 15% of teens have suffered a major depressive episode just in the last year. 60% of teens with depression did not receive treatment in the past year. Nearly 50% of LGBTQ youth have considered suicide in the past year, with more than half of those youth being transgender and non-binary, and nearly half of those being Black. All of these children are our students. Researchers recognize that this isn't a result of COVID, but rather that COVID has simply unmasked a lot of people with underlying vulnerabilities. The increased isolation and lack of social interactions during COVID have weakened social skills, increased individuals' inability to self-regulate emotions and cope with distress. Students that had to move to remote learning from COVID had heightened feelings of isolation and loneliness. And as I said, COVID didn't cause an increase in these struggles with mental health, but it did exacerbate it. Such change and disruption can magnify mental health difficulties, and we are seeing an increase in severity and prevalence in a multitude of areas. Children are having challenges in areas such as self-harm, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, And that's just to name a few. There's an increase in behavioral issues, an increase in the number of bullying incidents. Students are having a difficult time interacting and relating to each other. They're having a difficult time coping with all of these things. And the number of referrals to outside resources is increasing. Our students are struggling to bounce back from COVID, to figure out how to interact and problem solve. We're seeing a clear need to promote social emotional education in schools and understanding that social emotional learning is becoming an inseparable element of the learning process. Researchers have identified a relationship between academic performance, wellness, self-esteem, motivation, and satisfaction in educational areas. Well-being improves student academic performance, behavior, social integration, and satisfaction. And it also improves the teacher ability to interact with students and avoid burnout. And we'll talk about burnout in a little bit. The bottom line is you can no longer teach students today if you're not addressing the mental health and wellness of our students. Researchers have identified 4 essential elements for student success: engagement, hope, belonging, and social emotional learning. When schools and school leaders support students in these areas, they have found that students thrive. When we talk about engagement, it includes student involvement and enthusiasm for school. Hope consists of the ideas and energy students have for the future. Belonging is feeling accepted and included as part of the school. Social emotional learning is how people learn to understand and manage emotions and establish positive relationships with others. So what do we do with all of this information? Because it's a lot. We have all of these elements that we're being told are important to our students, and all of this data that is overwhelming, and all of these numbers that are staggering. So how can we help our students and our staff that we know are struggling every day? And how can we take all of this and put it into action to support them, to support our students, and to support our staff? And we're going to start with students. So check in with them authentically. And I know that we are all busy and we all have things to do every day and our plates are already full. But checking in with them authentically can be as simple as saying hello to them at morning drop-off and car lines. It can be getting out and seeing the students in the hallway, at lunch, at break, at dismissal, popping into a game or a play. I'm going to go back one slide, sorry. Going to a performance or an award ceremony. Any opportunity to let students know and to remind them that we are here and we genuinely care how they're doing. And that is important. Early intervention is important. Students are struggling with bouncing back. We know that. They're having a difficult time recovering from the changes and disappointment that they're feeling. And we need to work on teaching self-care, goal setting, and reflection. We need to work on teaching and celebrating student progress. Notice I didn't say success. Success is important too, but we need to celebrate progress. Progress is important. We need to work on developing a sense of belonging. A lot of our students report feeling isolated and alone and just feeling like they don't fit in right now. So working on building a sense of belonging and social and community wellness, that piece that we talked about earlier, is important. Reminding our students to hit the pause button, taking time out to unplug, to breathe, to steady themselves, and to refocus. And I'm not going to dive into social media that we all know is a huge problem, which is why I mentioned the unplug piece, and I'm going to leave it at that. But just reminding them to pause and breathe and unplug so that they can refocus on things that are important. They're struggling with coping skills and emotional regulation and resilience, and they need our help to develop physical wellness, that piece that we mentioned earlier. Consider ways to engage in peer conversations. Allow them to ask the questions that they want to ask. Discuss the topics that they are experiencing and allow them to see that others are experiencing the same anxiety and distress, and that that's okay. We need to normalize those conversations and allow them to talk openly about it. When students can learn to identify those emotions and regulate them at a young age, it helps them to calm themselves at an early age and seek help and advocate for themselves, and to prevent those negative behaviors that we're already seeing that they're having a difficult time behaviorally. We're seeing it a lot in our students that are coming back that are just having a difficult time interacting with each other, and having those emotional outbursts and those negative behavioral outbursts. So if we can help them to have those discussions and work to identify those and give them those positive coping skills, and the earlier we can start that, the better. And identify when they need help and who they can go to when they need to seek help. Some other things to consider: enlist student support. Your students not only want support, but they want to help each other. Use this. I have found that students are eager to learn and eager to spread the message to each other. We have some students, we've started a wellness club here, and there are so many students that want to help each other, and they are so excited about it, and I love to see it. They want to reach out to each other. They know what they're struggling with, and they can tell you that, and they want to get together and start peer groups. They want to be there for each other. They want that training. So train them on an appropriate level, obviously, to recognize the flags in each other and then know who to go to seek help when they need it, and what messages they need to spread. They will listen to each other before they're going to listen to the stuffy counselors and teachers, because we don't know anything, right? So help them help each other. Consider programs like Wellness Wednesdays and wellness clubs. They can be run by students and then facilitated by staff members. Wellness Wednesdays are things that you can incorporate on a small level that can be led by students. That can be school-wide. We're going to have our students that are going to go into the lower schools, and because we're a pre-K through 12 school, but you can incorporate something that works for you. But our older students are going to go into our lower schools and provide brain breaks for our lower school students and start teaching them those coping mechanisms, how to breathe through things, the proper way to have mindfulness. And then they're also going to do it for the older students, whether that be providing yoga mats that are available during breaks or in the mornings during advisory when they come in, just for a few minutes, or whether that be a flyer that tells you that it's important to have so many hours of sleep, or whether it be a healthy snack this Wednesday, whether it be a setup in the gym that students can do circuits during break. Just something that is not too over the top, that can't be controlled and monitored and facilitated, but can offer something healthy for your students to access. And it can be informational, it can be active, and it can be something that's a quick take and go. But different things that you can institute in your school, and we're going to try to do that every Wednesday, something that the students can take away. And again, that's a piece that you can share information out to your families, that you can let them know that this is something they can do, that they can be aware of. It's an educational piece, but not necessarily something that they have to take and keep doing at home, but just so that they're aware. And wellness clubs, things that they can share information with the students. We have bulletin boards that are out around the school, and students are going around and sharing information, and they're going to be trained on flags and who they can go to if they need additional help from whether it be peers or adults, depending on what the issue is. And then bulletin boards that have information on suicide and who they need to contact, what the numbers are for 24 hours, bulletin boards that change with information. This month it's eating disorders. It might be bullying. It might be domestic abuse, safe relationships, consent, things of that nature, but things that rotate and things that our students need information of and can be put out by other students. And train your students to be able to share that. I think it's very powerful when those messages are shared by students. Okay. Another good resource is CASTLE, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And at the end of the slides, I have a resource slide with those things that'll be shared to you so that you can access some of those resources. Some of them are free, some of them require purchases. I tried to make sure that a lot of them were free that you could access. And some of them have both free and pay for resources on them, but that'll be available at the end. And then classroom curriculum, incorporate that social emotional learning. And they have it at different levels so that you can try to get those interventions going so that it's more preventive. I like to get the problem before it is a problem instead of reactive, if you can. And then identify safe spaces and teachers for students to go to. I think this is important. Sometimes our students do this on their own, and this may not always be a good thing. I think it's important for students to have somewhere to go, but we need to make sure our students are aware of who they need to go to for assistance, and those people need to be trained to provide the appropriate support. And so they shouldn't just be anybody our students can find. We need to make sure that those teachers or those people that our students go to for help are trained appropriately to provide appropriate, safe support. Okay. And this is where training comes in. Train your teachers and support staff to recognize early warning signs. Develop referral processes so students can get to the person and the place they need to go to when they need to get there. This can be done throughout the year. It can be done at the beginning of the year. But we need to make sure that our students have access to services and supports when they need them. And this doesn't mean that every teacher or staff member needs to have a degree in everything, but just certain flags that they can be aware of so that they can say, okay, this is beyond my scope, and I need to refer this person to the counselor or to the nurse or to whoever that person is on your campus. And there are, of course, little things that the teacher or staff member can assist with, and then maybe shoot you an email and say, okay, this is beyond my scope, or I'm concerned about this. And that's completely appropriate. But just make sure you have plans in place so that they know who they need to contact, especially for incoming staff that's new, so that they're aware of what that process is. You don't want new staff coming in and having no idea who they should refer this student to if they're having a panic attack, or if they seem kind of down or they're breaking into tears in class, and they don't know who to send the student to. So make sure that you have a process. We have a student support team in place at our school, and we get together on a monthly basis, and we have a process where our teachers can refer students, whether it's for academic purposes, behavioral, social, emotional, and there's a process where they can refer those students and answer a questionnaire, and we get together and we meet and we review these students, and we pull students for, we review grades and things of that nature. And so we meet, and it has certain people who are involved, and that can help us try to keep an eye on students that maybe we don't, so that we don't have people falling through the cracks. So whatever works for your school, that's going to look different. You want to work to develop those early intervention services, and they'll look different in your schools. And consultation and collaboration can be very helpful in this area. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So reach out to each other and see what others have in place that might work for your school with some minor adjustments. Developing skill groups and programs can be very helpful in addressing different areas of concern. This can include academic or social and emotional concerns. Such programs can increase student achievement and help students build critical skills and connections. Anti-bullying, conflict resolution, problem solving, peer relationship building, suicide prevention, substance abuse prevention, whatever programs might be important in your areas, depending on what level you're teaching. We had some difficulty in relational aggression in lower school here. And so when we got here, we developed a group specifically to focus on that. And as the group grew, I realized it needed to drop down to lower grades. And so that kind of grew. And it needed to be, first it was just girls, then it was just boys. And as the need grew, I decided with everything that was going on, I needed to be very aware of gender identity. And so I adjusted the group for that. And so just be very aware as you're moving forward to include everyone. And so I've developed a co-ed group so that that's an awareness. So just when you're creating your groups and programs to address different areas of concern, see what's needed in your areas. Talk to teachers, talk to students, maybe put out surveys. Your students and your teachers know what you need. That's who knows what's going on. Your parents can be helpful too, asking them and seeking feedback, and then be aware of what's going on in your community, and try to keep that diversity piece and that inclusion piece in mind. And having those programs can help to build that leadership and social skill and self-awareness back into your community. We know wellness plays an important role in all areas of our lives. And if we expect our teachers to support our students, then we have to care for our staff. If done right, staff can provide positive role modeling for our students. Kaiser Permanente Thriving Schools has developed a program to empower schools to create safe and supportive learning environments that strengthen the social and emotional health of the faculty and the students. And this is one of the resources I've included at the end. They offer resources and opportunities to develop resiliency and strengthen social and emotional wellness. And they have a program called Resilience in Schools Environments, or RISE. And they have tools that identify strengths and opportunities for improvements in policies and practices that promote well-being in students, staff, and teachers. They have free accounts, and then they have some paid accounts. But I think it's a resource worth looking into, and it might offer some valuable information. So then the question becomes, how do we improve educator engagement while avoiding burnout? It's like the $100 million question. So burnout results from mismanaged chronic workplace stress and results in poor performance and decreased wellness for educators. Burnout increases the likelihood that an employee will take a sick day. It decreases the likelihood of an employee discussing performance goals with a manager. It increases the likelihood of emergency room visits by 23%. It makes an employee 2.5 times more likely to seek a different job. And it decreases an employee's confidence in their job performance. In an effort to support staff wellness, we should examine the work environment. We can do this with staff surveys. Surveys can provide a rough baseline of what the staff is thinking. Okay, what is the emotional climate of your work environment? Assessing staff needs can determine activities that may have a positive or a negative impact on staff. We can ask questions such as, what is good about working here? What makes working here difficult? And what are some possible improvements or areas that we need to discuss? When using an anonymous staff survey to identify the wellness culture of a school, honest objectivity is key. Leadership needs to be ready for critical feedback, and they need to have a willingness to change. And this can be difficult. When we look for feedback, we need to be ready for that feedback, and it's not all going to be positive. Much of it might be negative, and we need to be prepared for that. And then we need to be prepared to take action on that. But ultimately, individuals must take responsibility for their own happiness. So if a school has gone through this process and we've put out the survey, and then we've taken the action and actively addressed the needs, we've identified areas of strength, we've identified areas of weakness, and we've made improvements, then the last consideration must be, is this the right place for you? If you are still unhappy and we've actively made those changes, then perhaps this isn't the right place for you. And that can be a hard discussion too. But all this to say that wellness cannot be another task we ask our teachers to do. If we're looking at avoiding burnout, we can't simply ask our teachers to be responsible for all of this wellness for our students without considering the wellness for our staff. So when we discuss wellness, we have to include our staff in that discussion. And to do this, we need to listen, and we have to get to know our staff. So just like we authentically checked in with our students, we need to authentically have these discussions with our staff, and have genuine ongoing conversations with them and make them a high priority, especially in regard to work-related problems, and making sure that we hear them if they're having difficulties with other staff members, and things that we might be able to do better as in their environment and as an institution. Respect and celebrate staff, conduct formal reviews, and provide feedback. So not just saying, wow, you're doing a great job, and keep doing what you're doing. What can I do better? And this is what I've accomplished this year, and this is what I'm looking to accomplish next year. Is this a good way to move forward? What can I do better, and how can I do this differently? Making sure that everyone's opinion counts. When employees believe their opinions are welcome and they make a difference, then employees feel valued and they feel important and they feel included. And that allows them to take responsibility for their performance. And ownership reduces burnout. And that is the key. We want to reduce burnout because right now, especially post-COVID, we're seeing a lot of burnout, not just in our students, but in our staff. We have asked our staff to take on a lot of extra responsibilities and wear a lot of hats, and we're not checking in on our staff. And so we really need to work to reduce that burnout aspect. And allowing them to take responsibility for their performance and doing that genuine check-in can help reduce that burnout and provide a sense of control, which is what a lot of our staff is not feeling right now, is that sense of control. Finally, make work purposeful. Educators do not want to work for a paycheck. If we did, we would not be in this line of work. We would find something else to do. We want to find meaning in what we're doing. So rather than just pointing to a mission statement, help employees discover how their role in daily tasks contribute to that mission and fulfill that mission, and help us find meaning in that, and make that purposeful. Some ways that we might work to increase staff wellness. Sorry. Find opportunities for flexibility in schedules. And this might look different in your schools. Scheduling, flexibility in scheduling can be amazing. Staff is often asked to stay after for meetings, and believe it or not, staff have lives too. If it's possible to do after school meetings virtually or even from home, this might be a way to increase staff wellness. I always joke with the head of our school that if we have days where we have after school meetings or teacher work days where teachers can work from home, that a lot of us will be attending those meetings with umbrella drinks from the beach. But some schools have allowed teachers to have teacher work days from home. And this has increased staff wellness tremendously. Teachers can still, and staff can still get work done on staff work days from home. And this can really increase wellness. So consider finding opportunities for flexibility in scheduling. Provide stipends for additional duties. There's been shortages in staffing, shortages in substitutes. And so consider providing stipends for duties that you're asking your teachers to do that are extra duties with all the additional hats you're giving them and things that you're asking them to do beyond their normal workday, especially in a time where we've already discussed is an increase in prices everywhere and inflation, providing additional funds so that you can help them with that financial security and that financial well-being. Provide opportunities for teachers to plan together. This is something we've been doing here, looking at not only vertical planning, but planning within divisions, stepping in, and whether that means administrators stepping in to provide that time or groups stepping in to provide time for teachers to collaborate and work together to plan. And this can also give them time to positively impact student learning. Collaboration can lower planning on the planning burden on teachers, and it impacts student learning in a positive way. So providing opportunities to work together for teachers can increase teacher wellness. Asking for teacher feedback. Nobody knows better than teachers what's going to most benefit them and their students. So just like when I said before, asking students and teachers for their feedback. They know what's going to help them the most. So ask them for honest feedback. It shows them respect, and it asks them, and it lets them know that we're checking in with them and we want their opinions and their honest feedback. Provide wellness opportunities such as free mindfulness apps, health club memberships, yoga classes, additional support. One of the things the Wellness Club is doing here is also looking for opportunities to provide gratitude to the staff. And our students want opportunities to show gratitude to the staff. And I think that's wonderful. Understanding that our staff does a lot for them. And so students want the opportunity to do that. And I think that we should look for opportunities to thank them as well, and find ways that we can increase their wellness. Increased staff well-being can result in higher levels of engagement, lower turnover, and lower absenteeism. So that burnout piece, they're not going to be taking as many days off. They're not going to be sick as much, and higher levels of productivity. So a few final thoughts. School influences every aspect of a child's life. They are here every day, all day. They're here more than they are at home. And then they're with us when they do their after-school activities. If they're doing sports, which is just another piece of ways that we can either offer wellness or stress them out more. So it's vital that we provide an environment where our students can feel safe, where they can be valued, where we can increase that self-esteem and that belief in themselves, and that we can offer positive role models. And by investing in our staff wellness and our student wellness, we can provide those positive role models. Cultivating a culture of wellness within our schools, it requires us to review and refine practices and processes. And this is not a quick fix. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. But the investment in the well-being of our staff and students, it's vital to creating a positive academic environment. It's going to require a lot of work, but more so now, I think, than ever before. We've seen such an increase in so many different areas, in the decline in a lot of a lot of interaction in our students, and such a cry for help in the increases in anxiety and depression, the difficulty in our students interacting with each other, the difficulty in them to be able to work autonomously, to problem solve. I can tell you in my school personally, and in talking to some other counselors, just the increase, the onslaught of students I've had coming to my office seeking assistance, it has just grown so much in the last 2 to 3 years. And I have really tried to up my game in trying to provide the students with coping strategies and trying to head off this inability for them to really calm themselves and regulate themselves. I really feel that they don't have those skills, and trying to teach that and trying to teach our teachers to try to include that in the classroom as well. And I really don't think there's a separation there. We can't have that separation there anymore if we want to be successful. I have some, I am going to give time for questions, but I did want to show you that we do have some resources here. I'm going to give to Joanna to share with you guys, and obviously some references. But are there any questions?
Hi, Christie. I did get 2 questions that have come through, actually 3, one of which was if you would be sharing the slides. And so we'll be sending out that resource slide to everybody that's in attendance today, and your contact information as well, in case they had follow-on questions for you. One question that I had come through though was, with the rise in suicide rates in college students, do you have any recommendations for resources for seniors as they're going off to college and before they graduate, that we can help, that would prepare them for some of the things they're going to encounter?
Absolutely. So what's nice is that I work with Ms. Frady here. So one of the things we do at our school is with students, especially students that I see here often, is I get with Joanna and students that I know are going to have a difficult time transitioning. I get with Ms. Frady, and we make sure that those students have the information to schools that they're going to, depending on if it's like a registration process, but they have the contact information and the information available at those schools, depending on what that looks like for the mental health resources available at each campus. So Ms. Frady is really good about working with me to make sure that students are aware of what resources are available on campuses. She's amazing at making sure that each student matches with those schools based on what those particular needs are. And so I go to her and let her know, hey, I know you're working with this student, and I just want to let you know that this is a particular student that we're going to need to make sure has resources. And so then we sit down and we look at that campus and we say, okay, this is where those things are. And then the 3 of us will sit down with that student and say, okay, this is the phone number, this is where it's located. These are some people. And so sometimes we go ahead and depending on how severe the student is, and we'll go ahead and reach out and get that process already registered and things of that nature. So it depends on the student. So if you already know that that's going to be an issue, I would suggest doing something like that. If it's not as severe as that, simply having the contact information available so that they're aware of where those services are might be enough for your student. But we've had some that we've had to go ahead and get registered and get that contact already established before they leave our campus. Does that sound about right, Ms. Frady?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raines. And one other question that I had come through was connection can be challenging. You talked about connection and helping kids to be more connected. And I think that's complicated somewhat by the presence of technology in their lives and how they use that for connection. So do you have any sort of suggestions or ways that we can kind of work with students that are that may seem to be a little more involved in their technology than in relationships with each other?
Yes. So depending on the age group, I really like that at our school, a lot of our teachers have signs outside of our doors that ban cell phones before they can come into class. So ours will put up signs, and it's at teacher discretion, but most of ours have joined that bandwagon that say this is a cell phone free area. And so before they can come into class, cell phones go away. So they are required to interact with each other in that class. And that can be difficult, obviously, when they're not on our campus or when they leave that classroom. Other ones, we have a lot of groups available here and clubs available here on campus. And we are a smaller campus, so that can be a little bit easier, but we still have a difficult time, obviously, with that social media piece. Some of our students have taken to creating, and I won't say it's always great groups because that happens, but some of them have taken to creating groups where they play games that get them involved on the phones, but then they have to interact with each other because of the phones. And so they'll start like a game on the phone that requires them to like run around campus and do something. And I've seen them take part in that themselves, some of the groups that do that, which is really fun to see them kind of use their phones in a good way to get each other involved and start a game. And then we have a lot of clubs that kind of use like our Google Classrooms to send out meets so that we're kind of using the technology in order to try to pull them back to where they're meeting with us. And then with our smaller students, we've kind of created clubs to bring them together in a social aspect, but it can be harder with our older students. But I do like that and I've seen some schools that have boxes that they force the students to lock up their cell phones before they even come on campus, which I love, kind of removing that temptation.
And then somebody just commented based on, the conversation we were having about colleges that there's a concern that colleges don't have the resources to really handle what's happening with the mental health crisis, that you talked about in your presentation, and that scaffolding needs to be in place before they go to college. And just kind of educating our families that they should not just expect that they will be able to be served on a college campus.
Correct. And I think that piece is important, is knowing. And I think the college counselor piece is important there, is knowing your students. And so I think working with your school counselor and having that connection is important, and being able to say, hey, these are my students. Do I need to be concerned about any of these students? And should I be looking to make sure that, these students have resources when they get, to that next stage? And I'm very fortunate to work with Ms. Frady, and we have a good relationship where we get together and we say, okay, these students definitely need resources. And so we get together and we say, okay, we're going to sit down, and these ones have to have, we need to sit down, and these students have to have resources before they leave campus, or these students just need to be aware of resources that are available when they get there. And then there's some that we're not as concerned about, but we do have some that we have to get together and say, we have to have these in place. And we sit down with the students and we say, okay, these are the places that you can go if you need assistance. And we work with the students together, because there's some that you know your students, and you know which students are going to struggle because they've been struggling here with you in high school. And so to have that extra piece of independence, they need to have that safety net when they get there. And so you want to have that for them when they get there, and whether that means reaching out and having a person get in contact with them before they leave campus, that might be that extra piece, and making sure that they have that.
And then I guess the last comment that we had come through was just about community well-being, and how so much of this, I think, is really tied up in the sense of community that we can create at school, because they are spending so much of their time in the school environment. And so, I know you gave some suggestions for that, and we are lucky, like you said, to be in a pre-K through 12 environment. But for high school only environment, what are some thoughts that you might have about ways that community could really be fostered for our students?
I think communication is a big piece. For us, I like to get the coaches involved for, especially with our athletes, because our students talk to, as I said before, they don't always go to the people that have all the training that they need to have. And so I tried to make sure that I have that communication open with people that our students may be sharing things with. So being able to have that communication piece open with whether it's the band director or the coach or the music director or the, you know, it could be anybody. It could be the art teacher. So whoever those students might be going to, and making sure that everybody has eyes. I have students that go to certain places that they feel safe, and that's great. I want them to feel safe, but I also need to make sure that when that happens, that's on my radar, and that they can get the help that they need. So having that communication and those eyes in those places, and then making sure that our students don't get left out. So having eyes in, say, the commons areas or the lunchrooms, or our students are pretty good about letting us know if, you know, putting a bug in somebody's ear if somebody's consistently left out, which I'm grateful for. Or that might be setting up a diversity club, or we're getting ready to send out a survey to find out what areas our students feel they need more contact in. So, or what areas of interest they have. So, like I said, talking to your students and seeing what needs they feel are not met. And so I think that's important, and it depends on how big your school is. Our school is fairly small, so it's a little bit easier for us to create a community, I think, when you have a smaller area to cover. This can be harder and easier to leave people out in a larger group. But I think being able to have more eyes can help us catch those people falling through the cracks. And I think sending out a survey, I did a survey at the beginning of the year, just a general survey that was allowed the students to measure where they were on a scale of 1 to 10. Is there anything that you need me to know? This is how you can get in contact with me if you need to. What's your stress level? Is it, you know, social? Is it academic? Is it, and then just a blank thing at the bottom. Is there anything I need to know right now? And some of them had yeses and some of them had nos, and just a general check-in. And then we're going to do another one that's going to ask them what groups they might want to set up. You know, is there an area, like you said, in the community that you feel is missing? So do you want a diversity group? Do you want a religious club? Do you want a, what do you need that we're missing? And so I think getting that feedback from them and letting them feel like they're being heard is important and allows them to feel heard.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Rains. We really appreciate your time today and gotten some nice comments on your presentations. Great resources for everybody here, and definitely some food for thought going forward. So, and I think we're going to loop back to that mental health on campus question with our college panelists today as well. So we'll get some more, maybe some more information from them. So we are going to ask you to stop screen sharing, and we're going to go ahead and get our panel pinned here for the presentation that's getting ready to come up with the roundtable. And thank you again, Dr. Rains. So a little stretch break for everybody while we get our panelists going, but we're going to move right into the next thing.
All right, panelists, if you want to go on, unmute your video, that would be great.
So Sarah, I'm unable to undo my video. It says the host has stopped it.
Well, UNC Chapter, we're just, I promise I didn't do that to you on purpose, Sharon.
Oh, that's okay.
We'll get that squared away in just a second. Thank you. NC State's not targeting UNC Chapel Hill today, I promise.
Okay, everybody should be able to turn on their video now, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here today. So we've got a great panel here with us. And so I'll just start by introducing myself again, Sara MacKenzie, NC State University. I'm going to be emceeing the panel and putting on my SACAC hat today. So I am not representing my institution. So I'm here if there is anything, but we'll save that till the end. But we have a wonderful array of panelists from a diverse group of institutions. So we're really excited to have everyone here today. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and take turns and start with introductions. So each of them will share just a little bit about themselves, their role in their office, and then briefly describe just 1 or 2 minutes about a little bit about your institution, just a little nugget. And then if there's anything interesting you'd like to share as well. And if you all could pass it along to each other, I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Patrick to start us off. If you could, Patrick.
Okay. All right, gang. All right. My name is Patrick Stevenson. I'm the Assistant Director of Freshman Admissions at Fayetteville State University. We are a mid-sized HBCU in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Just a quick overview about my school is we are family. I know a lot of the times when you hear historically Black College and University, you think that's only limited to people of African descent. It's not. We love everybody. You can come be a member of the family no matter who you are. And that's one of the big things about us. We make sure that you get the quality of education, you have a good time while you're here. Because if college isn't fun, you're doing college wrong. And also we make sure that you have the quality of family around you, because college isn't just about having a good time. It's not just about that degree. It's what you do after that. So some of the things that we highlight is we're one of 7 schools that have a robotics program with NASA. We're the #1 city for Black and Brown entrepreneurs in 2022 and 2023. So we teach our students stock, bond, and trade all in real time. We have 5-year programs for a lot of our liberal arts degrees. So to include, but not limited to, social work, psychology, sociology, because when we're talking about those degrees at the base level, what you're looking at is you need that master's degree to go a little bit farther into what a lot of our students are looking for. And anyone who has some of those degrees can agree with me. And if I'm lying, I'm frying. And last but not least, man, we were founded as a teacher's college. So we have a praxis lab. And I know everyone who's ever taken a praxis, you shudder a little bit when you hear it, but we have a praxis lab because we know how tough that test can be. And we know being a quality teacher is important. So those are just some of the highlights about our institution and some of the things about us here at Fayetteville State.
Thank you, Patrick. Now we'll go ahead and have Dawn share. Okay.
Good morning. I'm Dawn Calhoun. I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Admissions at Wake Forest University. I've been at Wake Forest now. I think this is my 24th year, 23rd, 24th. I've stopped counting. But I'm a Wake Forest graduate, so I attended Wake Forest for both undergrad and grad school. So I'd love to talk about the school. I'm definitely very biased for the Wake Forest education. So we are a liberal arts institution. Students who are applying to Wake Forest are applying to the general college. The first 2 years are filled with different divisionals and a chance to, I call it feast on the smorgasbord of knowledge, basically. So a chance to figure out what that major, double major, major, minor, whatever that looks like for students is, and then declare that major at the end of the sophomore year. With that, we also have a teacher scholar model. So we find that our professors teach all of the courses. That's from the first year through the senior year. And our classes are a lot smaller. So average class size is about 20 to 25 students. They're very much discussion based. So students are able to not just listen to a lecture, but be part of that educational process, which is quite exciting. And we also have a motto of per humanitate, so for humanity. So students who come to Wake Forest, you see students, faculty, staff, really live that motto day in and day out. So basically being part of something bigger than yourself. So lots of community service will go on, lots of thinking about the world around you and then taking action. So it's an incredible 4-year experience for students who have the opportunity to learn a lot about themselves, because you're interacting with professors, interacting with other students who are coming from all over. So our students come from all 50 states, and we have about a 10% international population. So a great chance to learn about yourself and to learn about others and your place in this world and how you can make some positive change and take some positive action. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Dawn. Lori, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Excuse me. Hello, folks. I'm Lori Heiger. I am at Durham Technical Community College, but I have been at community colleges for either, if you count South Carolina, over 35 years. So I have always worked with the two-year programs. What's different about us is that community colleges are open admission. That means there's nobody we turn away. Now, that doesn't mean that every program is completely open admission. So, for example, some of our health tech programs have what they call a secondary admission, where you have to meet certain requirements before you can admit to that program. Durham Tech itself specifically has their set up as 7 pathways, which each of the pathways would be kind of like a college at a university. And then we have our pathways divided into short-term, long-term, and transfer programs. Short-term programs are less than a year, typically divided between certificates and continuing education type programs. Another thing that's very common in community college is the importance of our continuing education programs. Long-term are typically degrees, 2-year degrees in a specific area, such as biomedical equipment technology, network security, music, recording and audio engineer. Sorry, that's the short-term one. Clinical trials. We have a lot of diversity in our programs. It's just a matter of what area you're interested in. And then, of course, we have transfer, which is primarily our associate in arts, associate in science, associate in engineering, and associate in fine arts and visual arts. These areas are perfectly opportunistic for students to be in a secondary process of coming to us first and then going to a university such as my colleagues. One of the things that I really like about community colleges, besides the open admission, is that we're very small and community oriented. So we have typically classrooms that are less than 20 students. Even the largest classes are maybe no more than 30. Lots of hands-on learning. That's the matter of fact, one of our stressed areas. We have a lot of internships. We call them WBLs, which are like workplace learning, especially in our 2-year programs. I'm proud to say that the student services area is very student oriented in terms of supporting them. Even though we are not got dorms, we do try to have them supported in ways such as a food pantry, loaner computers, other things that would be helpful to students to be successful. Durham Tech specifically has a focus on equity as our challenge for the next decade or so. And I know that's an area that all schools really want to focus on, but we're really pushing it in our, both through our staff and faculty and through the students. So it's going to be a focus that the college is going to be focusing on for a while.
Thank you, Lori. David, I'm going to have you go next, if you don't mind.
Hello, how are y'all? My name is David Stevenson. I have the pleasure and honor of working for the greatest school in the UNC system, not because I say so, but because the evidence suggests our aptasticness, our awesomeness, and our amazingness. So if you haven't guessed, I do work for Appalachian State University. I have been here for almost 3 years now, and I've been in higher education for almost 6. So it's really fun times. A lot of great things are happening here at App State. This is the background of our brand new Hickory campus, and this is where I am actually stationed at now. In my day-to-day, I am transitioning out of working with international students as a primary, but I still do work with them. But a lot of great things are happening here. We offer a really great transformative education that your students, specifically international students, can come and get a very good opportunity to have their cultural capital enhanced by learning about different things from our students as our students learn different things about different cultures from them. So we are a great big school, but we also have small school vibes. So yes, we have 18,000 undergraduate students, but we offer a 15-to-1 faculty student ratio. So we are committed to making sure that there are a good number of well-educated professors to instill values about curriculum into your students.
Thank you, David and Jared.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jared Rosenberg. I'm Deputy Director for Undergraduate Admissions at UNC Chapel Hill. And like my friend Dawn, I'm on year 23 as well. I think we started around the same time and have kind of come up together. But thank you so much for having me. Just a couple of things to highlight about UNC and in following my colleagues. You know, when students apply to Carolina, the major is not something that we consider. And so our program is set up with an actual new curriculum called Ideas in Action, which just started this past fall, which allows students to take a much more focused first-year curriculum in terms of courses that are taught by multiple faculty, small discussion research seminars, as well as courses on thriving. So our students do not have to choose a major until their sophomore year, and their major will have no impact on admissions. But a lot of our students who are interested in professional schools such as business, nursing, pharmacy, just to name a couple, would apply to those schools as current UNC students. We're a little bit larger than App State and similar size, about 19,000 and change in terms of our undergraduate size, about 4,500 in our first year class. And to follow Lori, we actually bring in about 800 arts and sciences transfers each year. About 250 to 300 of them do come from North Carolina community colleges, the majority that have associate's degrees. So we're proud of that as well in bringing in a good transfer a good transfer class, especially from the North Carolina community colleges. The one quick thing I was going to emphasize is sort of the global aspect for UNC and that push that we have been making for students to have a global experience. And I just wanted to mention two very quick programs you may or may not be familiar with, both for students that are applying as current first year students. So one is our Global Gap Year Fellowship, where students who are admitted through our early action pool can apply for a gap year that UNC will fund, where they actually create their own experience. That's usually a combination of service as well as research, and the university will provide up to a $7,000 to $8,000 grant for them to actually do their gap year before they start. The other, also from a global perspective, is Carolina Global Launch, which is just 3 years old, where students, when they apply for admission, can preference that they want to be considered for this program on their application. And students actually spend their first semester, their first fall freshman semester abroad with a cohort of UNC students, either in Ireland, Scotland, or Spain. And it's usually a group of about 30 to 35 UNC students that spend the fall semester together before starting in Chapel Hill in January. So those are two global programs that we have specifically for students who might be interested in coming in as first years. So thank you very much for having me, and look forward to talking with you over the next couple minutes.
All right, thank you so much, panelists, for those great introductions. I think it really helps set the stage for who we have here today. We are going to circle back to a question that actually came up in the previous session. So we have seen the rise of mental health concerns, as was discussed, in the previous session about creating a culture of wellness. I know with that increase in mental health concerns, these students are transitioning, of course, from high school to colleges across the country and into the workforce already as well. Could you address in general, or specifics, anything that stands out at your university for how you help students transition or get supported through mental health concerns? So regarding the mental health resources, if anyone, we don't all have to answer all the questions, but if anyone would like to chime in, feel free to chime in, and then we'll move on.
Back at the one slide, it's Fayetteville State University. So we do have mental health resources for our students. One of the things that we learned during the pandemic is, one, college is tough, and being a human is tough. Like, you're in an interesting age of your life. So we have, one, mental health resources. We have individual counseling, couples counseling, group counseling. We got a place on campus you can get a massage in the middle of the day. Like, anything that you need as a student to be successful, not just academically, but socially, mentally, spiritually. We try to do. And I think that's going to be an industry standard as you hear my colleagues talk. Like we make sure that you have that backing that you need. Because like I said, college is hard. Being a young adult is hard. There are things that you know, and there's things that you don't know that you will find out very quickly your first couple years. And having someone to talk about those things with help, even if it's things that are at home. Because the home life does affect your college life. So you may be from an hour away, 2 hours away. And even if you're from a different state, like I went to school all the way in Colorado, things in North Carolina still affected me here. And even when I came home, like things back at school affected me when I was at home. So we have all those resources for you. And then even if you say, I don't really need a counselor, I just need somebody to sit and listen. I have students come talk to me. They're like, hey, Mr. Stevenson, I know you recruited me from Maryland, man. I just want to talk. And they will talk to me for hours about things that don't mean nothing about nothing, like how Kaleidoscope ended and how that ruined them for like the next 2 weeks in Heist movies. So we have space for everything. And I'll let one of my colleagues just piggyback off of that or go with that. But we have space for mental health, students with IEPs, and anything that you need.
I'll put in a quick plug. Panelists, we've had a request for you all to add your institution to your name signature, if that's possible. You can rename in the little 3 dots on the upper right-hand corner of your box. You should be able to rename yourself to include your school. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that answer. Does anyone else want to weigh in related to mental health resources?
Yeah, I'll give I guess some context to what students are encountering at Wake Forest. So of course we have our counseling center, so students are able to make appointments, but I also think about a couple different areas that have been enhanced because in response or being actually pretty proactive when it comes to mental health. So thinking about having a care team in place. So Wake Forest is a smaller school, and sometimes students may be struggling and maybe don't want to reach out or maybe not acknowledge or not even be aware that the deepness maybe of that struggle. And so our faculty members, our staff are able to refer that student to a care team, and then they have a chance they'll look in on them, see kind of a course of action that needs to take place as well. We also have a faculty fellows program, which is our faculty members. They don't live in the residence halls, but they frequently will be in the residence halls with different activities and checking in on those students in those first year residence halls. And they span all different kinds of curricula and allow for, I think, conversation. They allow for a little bit of fun too, some different activities, but somebody basically looking in on and taking care of those first year students. We also have a program called Thrive. So it's multidimensional. So things, of course, physical, financial, there are all kinds of stressors in the lives of students, in the lives of everyone, as Patrick was saying. And so being able to take care of those different areas and pay attention to what that looks like. Right now, even thinking about sleep. So there's a program right now going on called Sleep and Beacon. And so it's looking at how important sleep is in the lives of students. Even faculty and staff are taking part in this. And so acknowledging how can we improve different parts of our lives to improve that mental health as well.
Thank you so much.
I was going to add one note, from a data perspective, when we read applications, we will actually mark applications for wellness checks for students that are applying, especially if we are reading about severe depression, suicide, and the data backs up over the last 3 years, the number of wellness checks where we actually reach out to high school counselors has tripled over the last 3 years that we have made as part of our review. So it's not anyone's imagination, and I know there's anecdotal evidence, but we even have data about the number of apps that we will reach back out to high school counselors about. And since 2020, that number has tripled.
Thank you for sharing, Jared. Does any other panelists have anything else to add in this discussion?
You would think a community college would not have much in the way of wellness options, but Durham Tech has worked with a company that allows the students to utilize a counselor for 5 free sessions on one issue at a time. So let's just say they have an issue with stress, and then they have an issue with family abuse. They can keep switching and keep having counseling options as long as the stressor changes. They also have an option to extend it pass those 5 for a cost. The first 5 are free. We do have that for our faculty and staff too, which is kind of nice. So both students and faculty can address their wellness needs. Just a plug for our massage therapy program. We don't have massages for students, but we do have a massage therapy program where we train students to be massage therapists. And then there is an option for you to go to the massage therapy class and pay a small fee, $10 for an hour. And you can have a massage, so not bad. But that's we also have a cosmetology program and an esthetician program. So if you want to get a facial, especially if you live here near Durham Tech, keep us in mind.
Hey, that's great information as we're talking about wellness for each other too, right? Sounds like a great. Any other panelists have anything else related to mental health? Okay. If not, I'm going to circle back to Jared for one moment. We had a question come in on the Q&A, clarification on the funded gap year. Do you mind just clarifying what groups of students are eligible for that?
Yeah, sure. Any student who is admitted early action, they have to apply under our early action deadline. We will send them an invitation to apply for it. So students who are admitted early action can apply for the global gap.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move on to another hot topic. Trying to keep this interesting. So we have heard a lot in the past week or so about GPT. So for those of you who don't know about it, it's an AI response bot that can essentially do college essays for you if you're interested, or write whatever you need, right? One of my colleagues tried it and on some of our essay questions, and it was interesting. So could you discuss the role of the essay at your institution? You know, is there any advice on selecting essay topics? Will ChatGPT impact essay reading? Has there been any discussion? Just curious about that for you all.
I'll start. I think that essays are just really important in general because, you know, we essentially have a certain amount of time to read an application and to get to know everything about that student in 3 paragraphs or so. And so I think it's important that students write that from their own words and from their experiences. In my career, I've read probably 10,000 applications, kid you not. It's a lot. And this past year, I read the best essay that I have ever read in my entire career. This student compared themselves to a 5-piece chicken nugget kids meal from Chick-fil-A. And at first, I was like, it's gonna be a waste of my time, but here we go. And the student went down into each part on why she was saying that she was this student. So for example, she said that she always gets a 5-piece chicken nugget kids meal because she knows she can't eat more than that. And she knows that she will never eat more than that. And so it reminds her to be a good steward of her resources and how lucky we are to have things that we have. And then the student said that they trade their toy in for an ice cream cone, because if you eat ice cream fast, you'll get a brain freeze. And so it reminds you to take time to enjoy life and to do all these things. And then my favorite part of it was that she always gets a Dr. Pepper, because when you drink a Dr. Pepper, it explodes in your mouth, and she wants to be that explosion in everyone's life. It was the most unique written essay that I have ever read, and that displayed the student's creativity. And I don't think that systematic essay can get that across to the admissions reader about who the student is, because a lot of times from the essay we're able to say, oh, this student would be a really great student for our diversity scholarship, or this student would be a really great scholarship for a scholar for this program. And I think that would be hard for a generated chat to kind of figure out for us, but I guess to each his own. But I don't know if as an institution we'll have a way of knowing if that essay was written by a engineering mechanism type thing. So I guess really to each his own, but I try to get to know the student through my essay reading.
Thank you, David. Would anyone else like to weigh in?
Yeah, I think first of all, to David's point, we read the essays, we read the writing samples, and we remember them. I think it's probably my favorite part of the application, because it's the essence of a student. It's truly who they are or so we hope at this point. But I think you can also hear the voice of a student. I think that's going to be the tip off when it comes to any sort of engineered type of essay, because we're seeing a lot of different details about a student throughout the application. You, of course, have the transcripts of the courses and the grades, and you have the recommendations, you have the activities. And so to understand the voice of a student, I think that's where the essay, or even for Wake Forest, we have a series of optional short answers a student can choose to complete. But that voice really comes through, and it makes a student quite memorable. The process, I would say, to apply to Wake Forest is a very personal process, in the sense that we're really getting to know the students who are applying to Wake Forest, to the point that when they come for, let's say, an admitted student day, or you see them on campus, after that, you develop that relationship. So a lot of times you understand who that student is and what that student will contribute to this place and how they will make this place better, or how you hope they will. And so I think they are memorable. They add to the application, that written piece. And it's a part of the application a student has 100% control over. We talk about if a student, since we're test optional, submits scores, those are already set, grades are pretty much already set, schedule is done. And so this allows a student to really capitalize on being creative and showcasing exactly who they are. And my watch just is trying to tell me something, exactly who they are, and who they hope to be at on our campus at Wake Forest. So it's the voice.
I will piggyback and say everybody else is right. So first off, ditto. Secondly, I just give advice because I used to be an English teacher before I worked in higher ed. The thing I will tell all of my students is you have to write something that speaks to who you are. There's 101 kids with 4.0 GPAs, and I swear all of them think that they are the only child who had a 4.0 GPA. I promise it to you. You're not the only kid who was first in their class. You're not the only kid who did well on the SAT or ACT. So, just like Ms. Calhoun said, your essay is that window into who you are. And just to talk about the bots have no soul. And for people who read essays, I can tell if that student's a reader. So if that student read books, I can tell. If you read literature, I can tell if someone else wrote that for you, because it doesn't fit. And as a person like Mr. Stevenson said, Mr. Stevenson 1, not Mr. Stevenson 2, said, it's very hard. So the advice I give students is write about something that you overcame. So if you have a student and you write about something you overcame, every student now, we understand mental health is a problem. Tell me about how you got through it, because those get morbid. And after the 17th one, like I got to go to Chick-fil-A or something, like I need a break. So I tell students, hey man, make every story have a happy ending. It's your story. You're still in it. So end your story with a happy ending. End your story with something you learned. End your story with something that you came out better for. Because if I'm looking to evaluate you as a student, and the only thing I hear is, yeah, man, I dropped my ice cream cone and it was hot that day. Like that's a tough story to get through. But if it's, hey, I dropped my ice cream cone, but I remembered I had $5 in my pocket and I bought another one, and then I split it with my little brother. Like something, end your story on a positive note. Tell me what made it through, and tell me how that makes you a better fit for this institution, opposed to having a bot write it. Because again, I can tell if you don't read books. And that's my advice for students as an English teacher.
Maybe you need to develop a bot then that can tell us if it's rude. No, I'm just kidding. There was a related question that came through on chat. So are you concerned about the fact that in the recent article, more than half of the bots or the admissions officers were not able to tell that they were reading an AI generated essay? Are you developing screening mechanisms? Do you anticipate moving, to newer ways to hear the student voice, like videos, etc.? So just curious if anyone's having these conversations on your campus. I know it's very new. So
I just want to sorry.
You sure?
I want to throw out the open admission situation at Durham Tech, but we do have scholarships. So we do have that essay issue when it comes to our scholarships. And I've been a reader on the scholarship committee for quite a while now. And again, you really can tell the student from something generated, because usually students have errors in their writing. they're not perfect yet. Whereas those bots really don't make errors. They don't have grammatical errors. They don't have spelling errors. So it's more natural to see a student writing, I don't know, kind of not quite so good, but it's them, it's their real voice. And that's, I think, important. I'm sure that all the other people who do admissions do that same thing. The difference between a community college and a university with the open admission is I don't do admissions, I do academic advising. And that's when I get to know the student and try to direct them and help them to find their way here at a community college. So I get to meet them sometimes in person, but a lot of times, especially during COVID, I was doing this via email. And it is a struggle to get to know the voice of the student if you're not getting more than that, just that basic information. So the essay is really important. And so I hope everybody is encouraging people to write their own essays. I do.
So I'll answer. That's twice for me. I'm messing up. So I'll answer that really quickly. Bots don't anti-write. And as an English teacher, like you can see that bots directly answer the question and they never veer off. Whereas students, like, Ms. Lori said, students write imperfectly. They write how they talk. So if I call you and I say, hey, John, like, you put this in your essay, it'll sound like John wrote that. But the bot, it sounds too perfect. Like I said, you can tell a student that reads books from the literature, because if I call you and I ask you about a thing in it, the way in which you speak does not transfer into the way in which you write. So that is the way I tell.
I think we all need. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, so I want to address the fact this is very new, and we're having discussions. I don't think we have any direct answers to give you at this time because we're learning along this with you. We know the questions are there, and so we're talking about it in advance of next year. So just to put that out there, it's on our minds, but it's so new to us too that we're still learning. I think the other thing, I agree with what my colleagues have said, and I'll say, you can triangulate the essays with the rest of the application. And so the best essays are the ones that actually expand on other parts that you might read about. So whether it's things that students have accomplished or done, whether it's about background or stories you read about from the recommenders, typically the essays are going to touch on other parts of the application. And without any of that context, an essay that's just sort of out there that doesn't really necessarily match or hook up to other parts of the app is going to be something that's kind of questioned or be questionable or not necessarily have the same impact. I think it's also important to remember, students have been receiving help on their essays for years, and students are not, there's varying amounts of help. And so I say this with the idea that some students have no help and are swimming on their own, and other students are in environments that provide them tremendous amounts of help. But we've already been working with that issue for years about, for as long as essays have existed, did the student write this themselves? How corrected is this by their English teacher? So it's not a new topic for us about who wrote the essay or how much of the student's voice it is. And so we've kind of recognized that as well in this process. I do think it's going to be some trial and error. Us too, we can take our essay questions and put them in the chat, GBT, but it's not the same as what the students have been writing, because the best essays refer and point out and connect with other parts of the app, and the chatbot doesn't know the rest of the app. And so that is something important to keep in mind.
Really quickly too, I'll add in that with Wake Forest, we do have an interview process. It's an optional process. So either a student can request, I'll call it a face-to-face. Right now they're virtual and have been for the past couple of years. So via Zoom, so it would be like this, having a conversation one-on-one. And then we also allow students to choose the option of submitting a video. So they have a chance to do a video interview. So we can hear from them directly. So a chance to understand, again, what's really important to them. We give them some different prompts that they have a chance to respond to. And so we, again, have the opportunity, if the student chooses to take that opportunity or that option, to know even more about them in a certain area. So to hear their voice physically, rather than through some writing. So a couple different ways. So either, trying to gather that voice from the written piece, or listening to that voice through that optional interview piece, either the virtual interview or the video interview.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back related to essays. We're going to answer a couple of the questions that came in a little bit ago from chat. If students reveal serious issues in the essay, does it impact admission, especially if it's severe enough that the campus might not be able to accommodate the need? That was one question. And related, if a student writes about mental health issues or severe issues, does that negatively impact admission? So it's related to questions that came in. And yes, Patrick.
So one, it depends on how serious, because I think if my colleagues don't agree with me, like they're in the same mindset. If it's bad enough, I'm gonna tell somebody. Like it depends on what it is. So for example, if you talk about hurting yourself, hey man, we might need to talk to somebody. So there are some things that are out of our scope. Like there are some things that in your essay, it's a bit of discretion, but also in your essay, it's, what does that do for your question? So when we talk about the mental health aspect, like I said, we have people here that deal with that. So it's like, hey man, I read this essay and this student said this. I need you to reach out to them. So we care about you beyond just getting you admitted, because you're going to be a member of our family. So when we talk about, does mental health affect you? It depends. And that's as honest of an answer as we can get. Like, it depends on what you say. It depends on what that issue is. And it depends on how you're dealing with that or not dealing with that, and why you put it in your essay. There are some things we need to know, like if you have an IEP, or if you need a little bit more love that day, or if there's something feels a bit funny in your soul. But also, like, if you're talking about hurting yourself, we need to get you to a doctor. We need to get you to a professional. We need to get you to someone who can help you. If you're telling me you have crippling depression, hey man, there are people here that can help you with that. But realistically, that person's not me. So it depends. And I encourage every student to use that amount of discretion. Do you need a counselor at a university, or do you need a trained professional? And so some of those things are just honest about where we are.
I had mentioned before, that the number of wellness checks on applicants have tripled. Most of the time when we're reading about mental health in an application, we'll reach out to counselors. And if it's a situation where we're really concerning, or it's something that's going on currently, we might have a conversation with the counselor a little bit about fit and whether this is the right place for them, because we want to make sure that we're not putting a student in harm's way by coming here. And, I think, speaking for UNC, we are a larger school. We're about 19,000 students. And so students do have to do a little bit more. We have a lot of resources, but students have to seek them out at times. And so, some students might be more suited for a smaller environment versus a larger environment. So I think it's something that we do think about. But I will say, over the years, there have been very few incidents where, after talking with a counselor, that we have felt uncomfortable admitting a student. So the majority of time, especially over the last couple of years, there's a lot of things that do stress students. And we also know that most of our students who are not writing about it also have some of these issues. We're not just assuming everything is bright and cheery for every kid who doesn't talk about it in their application. So we know that exists unknown to us for most of our applicants as well. So in very few circumstances would it cause us to not admit a student unless it's extremely, extremely serious.
All right, thank you all so much. We are going to transition to talking about curriculum. We spent a lot of time on essays, which is great, but I know curriculum is important in the admission process and the decision. So can you talk about what you really think about dual enrollment, AP, IB, honors? There's been a lot of discussion in the landscape about, rigor of curriculum and holistic review and how that determines the decision. So if you could weigh in on that, that would be great.
I'm going to throw in first, because we're a different kind of admission to a university. We have transfer students. And one of the things we try to encourage students to do is to finish up their degree, because they have a lot better chance of getting into their preferred university. But students are always wanting to do shortcuts and they want to do it after fewer credits, in which case then it's all about the grades. But we also have students that come from the universities who have essentially had some struggles and they have to pull their grade point up, and we try to help them with that. But I don't let them get away with taking a cheap class just to get a good grade, because that's not going to help them in the long run with their education. And I think that's probably kind of related to this question, because it's all about not just the rigor of their, what are they going to gain from their experience?
And we too, so when it comes to the academic record, so looking at the 4-year record, so how students have done from that first year through their senior year of high school, understanding what school they're attending. So what are they offered at that one school? Is it an honors program? Is it AP? Is it IB? Is it AP and IB? Is it dual enrollment? So understanding the student in the context from which they are applying. And so just looking at that. And so not comparing school to school, or what they could be offered if they went to the school across town, because that just wouldn't be fair to that student. So looking at the student in the context of the high school, and we do want students to take an academic risk and do well. We want them to be able to think very deeply, have those critical conversations, have some incredible discussions to basically prepare them for that next level and enjoy that process too. I'm a huge nerd. I love school, and I think there's something about that learning process. And so wanting a student to really grab hold of that process as well and understand, hey, you know, I need a well-rounded education too, and not get specialized in high school just yet, because there's still time for that. So taking a good foundation of different courses that lead up and basically start and lead up to a stronger rigor as they go through their 4 years of high school. So it is important to look at that. A lot of times too, you know, we'll tell students to exhaust all possibilities in the AP and of course, typically IB before moving on to a dual enrollment situation. And so for us, that's where we will land with that. But understanding a student wanting to take on an academic risk and doing well in that curriculum.
I'll say too, from our perspective, and I think my colleagues know, is certainly within the state of North Carolina, you know, 82% of our enrolling class has to come from North Carolina. And I know, you know, Sara, at NC State and other places, the proliferation of early and middle college programs across the state just over the last 5 years. I mean, from in-state alone, you know, now we receive close to 1,500 applications from students graduating from early and middle college programs, you know, the majority of whom are earning or trying to earn an associate's degree along with their high school diploma. And, you know, we do consider that to be a strong curriculum when a student is doing that, you know, so if you're working with students who are earning their associates and they're taking that full sort of associate's curriculum, you know, they'll get a very high rating for us when it comes to their program. So in addition, you know, students that are in more traditional high schools, just like, you know, John and others have said, we'll see, you know, AP, IB, and we'll consider what the school offers. But I wanted to add the note about early and middle college because, you know, we do, those students are admitted, actually, their admit rate pretty much mirrors the admit rate overall, if not even a few percentage points higher than our overall admit rate for North Carolinians if they're coming from an early college program and earning their associates.
So I'll take from two perspectives because, again, former high school teacher. The first piece I'll tell you is we do have, like at Fayetteville State, we have a 2-year debt-free program for our early college students. So if you're an early college kid and you come with a debt-free program, we give you 2 years. And that's if you're a North Carolina kid. The other thing I tell you is you have to have some intentionality in what you do in high school. So I understand that a lot of times we say, oh, well, they're 18. Well, how old is 18 really? 18 is pretty old. 18 is old enough to know what you wanted to do. A lot of times we see students say, I graduated early. Can I come to college? Yeah, you can, but you know, are you ready to start in the spring semester of a year? Did you take those AP classes? What was the point? So for some of us, and I've seen this at previous institutions I worked at, all AP means is that you took a harder class because it wasn't connected to a college or university, and then you didn't do so hot in it too. So now you hurt your GPA, and then you've also taken a class and stressed yourself out for a year. So when I talk to students about what that looks like, it's make sure you have intentionality in everything you do. If you have a plan, run with the plan. I will not talk you out of it. But if what you're saying is, I just want to graduate early so I can get started with the rest of my life, I promise you, you're not going to be older just because you graduate early. It's still coming and it's still going to look the same. So have that intentionality in what you're doing, have that intentionality in the courses you're taking, and have that intentionality in looking into the future, because there's nothing wrong with having all your credits and just taking a semester to look and plan for college. But that's the teacher in me. So
There is a related question about early college that came in chat. Do students coming from early college programs typically graduate in less than 4 years? If anyone has any of that information. If you don't, that's okay too.
Some do, yes. I mean, I can, given the number we have, many, however, stay for all 4 years. And I think it depends on the student's goals, and it's a personal decision. I mean, obviously, if a student has their associate's degree from a North Carolina community college, they get a block of credit that meets, the majority of requirements outside of a major, and they're halfway to their degree. But given, research and study abroad and double majoring in professional schools, and the expectations from graduate schools, and medical schools and things of that nature, a lot of times they will still stay for 3 or 4 years anyway, just because they recognize the value of being here, or they, just it's fun and they don't want to, they want to delay the real world as much as they can. And so we see it both directions, but we don't encourage them one way or the other. We try to work with them individually to help them make their own decision based on their goals.
Thank you all. We're going to transition to test scores. So, okay, sorry. One really quick question for Jared before we move on. You're getting called out in chat. If a student is not doing an AA through early or middle college, just taking dual enrollment courses instead of AP or IB, how do you all, not just Jared, review those? So how do you view AP, IB versus dual enrollment courses?
So we have typically, if a student is doing AP or IB or dual enrollment, whether that's at a 2-year school or a 4-year school, because we have a lot of students that dual enroll at 4-year schools as well, we see that as a level of curriculum challenge, and we don't necessarily prefer one or the other, but I will say this: if a student is dual enrolling, whether it's at a 2 or 4-year school, and they're doing that instead of AP or IB courses, we do want them to be core curriculum classes for them to be considered as part of the curriculum difficulty. So, a student can take, a music appreciation course or criminal justice or things of that nature, and that is not typically the same as students who are taking American history too, and calculus, and English composition and literature. So we do look at what the courses are that students are dual enrolling, not just that they are dual enrolling.
Anyone else have anything to add before we move on? Are we all good? Okay, great. We are going to move on to testing, because that's a big conversation right now as well. So, question about test optional, required, the future at your institution, if there's any information to share. Also, how do students figure out if they should submit scores or not? It's another layer of complexity, that COVID kind of brought upon us, and we jumped quickly into that. And so if you could discuss, your insight from your institutional perspective, that would be really great. And then also how testing might come into play for you, Lori, maybe at the community college or other placement testing, that sort of thing. Thank you all.
So at least for Fayetteville State, we are test optional this year. But the thing I tell you about, if you're taking a test, it makes you a lot more competitive if you have a test opposed to not. So again, the 101 kids have 4.0 GPAs, but let's say we take 2 kids sit side by side and one has already taken their SAT and one has not. It makes you more competitive when you're looking at those scholarships. Do I know if everyone's going to go to test optional as we continue on? I do not, but there are some benefits, at least in my personal perspective, and then there are some downfalls of it. But the thing I tell students who are asking, do I need to take an SAT or do I not? Yeah, go ahead and take it. Take your SAT, take your ACT, see how you score, see how you feel about it, see if that score lends to what you want it to look like. And then if it does, use that score, send us that score, let us know you're a smart cookie. If it doesn't, and you're test optional, keep it in your back pocket. Don't tell everybody your secrets. But if you're looking whether you should take your test or not, look at the scholarships, look at those requirements, look at those admissions requirements, because the secret is they're all on our website.
Thank you.
So yeah, so Wake Forest has actually been test optional since 2008. So we were the first top 30 university to go test optional. And so to us, it's been a way of life, and we've really been quite pleased with it. So we will tell students, submit scores if you would like, don't submit scores if you would like, and we don't try to question if it's a good score, deemed a good score or not. What's important to us, and we have a great understanding of standardized testing. So we have a professor on campus, Dr. Joseph Suarez, who's done a lot of research when it comes to standardized testing, and the correlation is a very strong correlation for family income to how a student does on a standardized test. It's a very weak correlation for how they're going to do in college. And so for us, what's most important is that school record, that 4-year record, and taking away a barrier that could be in place for students when it comes to the testing. So being test optional for all those years has been really important. And we are test optional from admissions through scholarships. So students don't have to submit scores at any point in the process. And so if a student wants to submit a score, that's great. If they don't, that's great too. And we actually do collect scores at the end. So after all decisions are made, so of course we can have that middle 50% and what numbers look like. And we have seen scores that can be quite high, or deemed, again, quite high, that were not submitted because students understand and are taking a stand or will take a stand with us to understand the role of a standardized test. So for us, since 2008, and we will never look back. I think it's something that was really quite important to do and be on the forefront. And we actually had professors when, the first year, those students came into that class who would come to us and thank us for that process, because they were seeing different kinds of students, because we took away that barrier to be able to have all kinds of students with different backgrounds coming to the campus. So test optional for us since 2008. And it can be part of an application or not, and that's completely up to the student.
I'll address, the UNC system remains test optional through the fall of 2024. And so for those of us that are part of the UNC system, that decision is made at the system level, not the office level. So please know that. I think our staff really enjoys being test optional. We're in year 3 now, and we've been able to look at data, and we've been able to look back on the decisions that we've made. And I think, our staff really enjoys being able to do that and reviewing if test score if the student submits it, and really not worrying about it if they don't. But at this point, we really have zero, or I certainly have zero indication of whether testing will come back for fall of 2025 or not. It's just a question we can't answer right now.
Thank you all. We do have one more test related question from the audience before we move on.
You want me to go ahead and talk about community colleges?
Yes, please. Sorry, Lori. Thank you.
So yeah, community colleges use for placement the high school GPA as the first and foremost way of determining where the student is placed. So if a student has a certain GPA, unweighted GPA, then they go into a certain level of developmental or support or traditional college level. If the student has been out of college for 10 or more years, we then give them an option to take a placement test to determine where they are, or if they got a GED, or they got went to a school like Carolina Friends, which doesn't have grades, they can take those placement tests. And the main goal for us when it comes to this testing is to put them in the right classroom, not to punish them for not having good scores or good GPA from high school, but just to make sure that they're successful once they get here. And I suspect that's kind of what testing has always been about to some extent. But I as a personal person, not as a person who's at community college, I scored very poorly on my SATs, and not poorly, but poorly for the schools I was looking at. And I was very bummed, but I'm glad that the scores optional does now exist.
Yes, and I think we'll continue to see that trend we know we'll continue to see that trend. We did have one more question related to testing. So test score ranges now, because of test optional policies, sometimes can be skewed. Are you encouraging students to look at pre-pandemic test scores, you know, when they're looking at admission? Specifically for you, Dawn, did you see your ranges shift upward after the pandemic?
So we did see the range shift upward, but I'll also kind of put in a plug or think about test optional or students who choose to submit scores and those students who do not. The success of students, so comparing those two groups, is basically the same. So when they came into Wake Forest, if they submitted scores or they didn't, we saw that their GPAs were virtually the same. So they're doing quite well. So we did see a little bit, of course, of an increase when it came to average test scores or middle of 50%, but of course, putting that in context and understanding the context from which that's coming from.
All right, thank you all. I think we'll move on to, we have two more topics that we're gonna squeeze in here in the last 6 minutes. So we are, you know, faced with race conscious admissions being under fire right now and questioned, and there is going to be a Supreme Court decision on the use of race consideration in the admission process. You know, can you talk about how to best support students from historically marginalized populations? And just any thoughts that you have about this as it relates to your admission process and the consideration of race.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start since it's our case. It has been near and, you know, something I've been involved with now for really it's 9 years now, ongoing. I was deposed as part of it and testified as part of it. And while I can't talk about specifics in terms of the case directly, and it's not something I'm able to talk about right now, I can say from the counselor's perspective, I think what's going to be extremely important is continuing to relate to us context for students, their personal stories, their backgrounds, where they're from, what their home life is like, what their school life is like. You know, context has always been a really important part of our review for the last, you know, 2 decades, and it's something that we talk about a lot. And so I don't think this doesn't change that. If anything, it just enhances the fact that we're going to want to be able to learn more. I think it's going to be important that this doesn't just fall on counselors, this falls on teachers as well, because we require teacher recommendations. And I think a lot of the times, you know, we're more forward facing with counselors, and counselors are the ones we're talking to on the phone more often and emailing back and forth. But the majority of recommendations we get are from teachers. And I think it's going to be important for us to make sure that teachers are educated on the best kinds of recommendations, how to write them well, the type of information that helps us, because I think we're going to want to get this information from both sets of rec letters. I'll also mention that it's going to be important for counselors to educate students on the admissions landscape and the types of information that we're going to be able to consider and not consider, because going back to the essays and, you know, having a bot write it for you is going to be the fact that there's going to be information that'll be, you know, I think valuable background and context that students can share with us as well about their personal stories and their lived experiences. And I think that becomes important as well. It's always been important. Let me stress that. But, you know, I think so counselors will be able to help us by educating teachers, by educating students, and by working with us hand in hand to make sure that you're information that helps us make good decisions, because we're still committed to wanting to bring in a diverse class. And diversity broadly defined, everyone thinks about it as just race or ethnicity. It's also first generation college, it's low socioeconomic status, it's first generation Americans, and it's talents and ideas and backgrounds. So that is all part of the diversity that we look for.
Thank you so much. Anyone else have thoughts to share?
Yes.
Yes, Patrick.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. That's 4 for me. I'm almost striking out.
You're not striking out. You're participating. We appreciate it.
So the thing I say when we talk about diversity is it's always interesting by comparison. And I share this bias with you because this is going to be a biased perspective. I work at a historically Black college and university. So when we talk about diversity, that looks a little bit different for us. And I know when I go out to school, students always say, hey, I'm looking for a diverse background, I'm looking for a diverse school to go to, but they haven't looked at any HBCUs. So when we're looking at students, Black, white, first generation, Indigenous, whatever your background is, I encourage every student to do a semester at HBCU. Especially our students not of color, because you go into the workplace and you have to deal with diverse groups, especially the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous people of color. And if you've never been in those spaces, it looks different. So if you have the opportunity to go to your HBCUs, and even if you don't attend, because I understand sometimes that's not where you wanted to go. I was a little kid who grew up in North Carolina. I wanted to go to Chapel Hill. I get it. So yes, that's a plug. And so I get it. But I encourage you, if you do nothing else, do a tour of HBCU, all of my students, so you can see what that environment looks like. Because if you tell me you want a diverse background, my first question is always, did you look at a HBCU? So and that's as much as I go into it when we talk about diversity, what it looks like when we're talking about diverse campus environments. Fayetteville State is one of the most diverse schools in the continental US. We are an HBCU, but a lot of our population comes from the military base. So we have Latin Americans, we have white Americans, we have South Asians and Asians. We have a large community of just about everybody because we sit next to the largest military base. So that's always what I tell students when they tell me they want diversity. What does diversity really mean? Is it first generation students? Is it women in power? Is it Black and brown students? What does that look like for you? Because we have a little bit of all of it. But if you're not looking at all the schools that you have available to you, especially as many schools are in North Carolina, you miss out on those opportunities.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to end the panel with, if each of you panelists could just share one parting thought or advice you have to share with counselors today, that'd be wonderful. And then we will depart.
So I'll start, since I'm the different school, way different. Keep in mind community colleges for the students who are interested in going to college, but not necessarily interested in going to college. We have a lot of diverse programs. We have those programs that are only a few months long. Actually, we even have a program that's 1 day long, notary public. And we have the long-term college transfer oriented programs. And for those students whose grades were not as good as they had hoped, we're a great stop off before they go to Chapel Hill, or they go to App State, or to any of the wonderful schools in our state. And in fact, we have some special relationships with some of them. And privates like Wake Forest are excellent options too. We still send students, all community college sends students to private schools because we have lots of good agreements with private schools as well. So community college is an option that you should think about for your students, even students whose great grades, but doesn't have financial means to travel to another school. 2 years at a community college may let them save up to go over to Fayetteville State from Durham. So that's a thing to look at for the options that they have in their future.
Thank you so much, Lori. Anyone else?
So the last thing I tell counselors is you got to do what works for the kid. And again, I say that as a former teacher, you got to do what works for the kid. A lot of the times, like Ms. Lori said, if we struggle to get you out of high school, sometimes you need to take that step back and stay home. If you're predisposed to going somewhere, let them go. Sometimes you need to see that the water is wet or how big the ocean is. You got to do what works for the kids in those environments. And for my students, make sure you go visit these schools, man. Like it's a bunch of schools. If you like a school, go see it. Because I will tell students all the time, as long as my check comes in on the first, I am not telling you anything bad about Fayetteville State, but I will show you what you asked for. So please come see the schools that you think you want to go to or that you have an interest in. There's open houses coming up for Fayetteville State. It's March 25th.
I would say don't assume just because of a particular record that you're looking at that a student can't be admitted to one of our universities or institutions. I've heard from students at times, well, my counselor said I wouldn't get in, so I didn't apply. And I, look at them or look at their application or find out later. And I think that's not necessarily true. I think, again, thinking about context and meeting students where they are in their lived experiences, there are certain areas of the state where, we know the curriculums aren't as strong, or we know test scores will tend to be lower based on a student's background. And so I would encourage you that if someone's looking at one of our schools and you're wondering whether they have a legitimate chance, or you're trying to advise them, give us a call and talk to one of us. We can certainly talk to you and be as candid as we can without, making a final determination, without seeing an entire application. But we see students from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds with all different credentials. And because it's a holistic review, sometimes there are reasons that we may admit a student, even though maybe on the initial surface, well, they have too many B's, or their rank is this. That's not necessarily the marker of a decision. So I would encourage you, to do that.
I think just to kind of continue that conversation as well, really lean on us. We do what we do because we enjoy developing relationships with students, with counselors, and we lean on counselors to understand your students. And so it's definitely that two-way street. So lean on us if there are questions, if there's any sort of confusion, if there's something that needs to be added into an application, if you just want to get to know the school, reach out to us. And so we really enjoy getting to know counselors and developing those relationships. And we're always so happy to help. And so we appreciate all that counselors do. There is a lot, and it's an incredible profession. And I think those who are in it, that you all have huge hearts and you really care as well. And as do we. And so we're excited to walk alongside you to help your students to be successful wherever they end up.
Well, we couldn't have planned a better parting statement, Dawn, so thank you. Thank you all very much for every panelist that was able to join us, and attendees. I know you have busy schedules and this is a hard time of year for everyone. So thank you so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate it. We will email you follow-up information about how to become a member of SACAC. Public school counselors and community-based organizations can do a free membership. There's also a conference coming up in April in Florida, so we'll give you more information about that. But thank you so much for coming, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.
My pleasure.
It looks like it's
there's no room, no space to rent in this town.
Are we good?
I'm just removing the people who probably walked away at some point. Remove. Now we've got 4 people still sitting in here.